Russell Westbrook wants out, right? But the circumstances that are arising, having conversations, I believe in January after a heartbreaking loss, he addressed the whole team. He had a whole team meeting and he led the meeting. And he critiqued every single one of the guys' games and said what they need to work on. You know what he did, though? He started with himself and said, I need to be better at doing X, Y, and Z. And then he went around the room. People were receptive. They might have not liked what they heard, but they were receptive as a general consensus. There's one guy who was like, I ain't trying to hear that. Do you remember who asked Dwight Howard to dip? Do you remember who asked Chris Paul to dip? Do you remember who's now has Russell Westbrook leaving him for the first he left Russell Westbrook, now Russell Westbrook's leaving him some years later? James Harden, who is the hardest superstar. He's an undeniable superstar. The hardest superstar and assassin to build a team around in the NBA. Hot take or nah, I'm turning it over to Vice because I feel like it.
Okay. Well, you want me to tackle that take of is he the hardest superstar to work with
Tackle
in
it.
the NBA? Well, I mean, to be honest, I think Westbrook's harder to work with than Harden because, Harden, at least on the court. Off the court, maybe a different story, but on the court, at least Harden can set up plays for his teammates. He makes a lot of the guys look good around him. PJ Tucker's career was revitalized playing with James Harden. Robert Covington looked really good playing with them. I understand what you're saying about James Harden being the toughest to work with because he plays a very strict, like, this is how we're playing basketball style. Ball goes through me all the time. And that can be a little bit irritating, I'm sure, for some players to deal with. But I don't think the fact that 3 players have left, it's not like he had LeBron James on his team and LeBron left. It's like he had Dwight Howard, who wanted the ball and was trying to have a different role than what he probably should have had. Chris Paul, that was just a personality issue more than anything else. They just both wanted the ball. I think the same thing's happening with Westbrook. So is he the hardest player in the NBA? No, I wouldn't say. I think there's harder dudes to work with. Westbrook being one of them because, honestly, I've been watching basketball for my entire life. I don't know how you win with Westbrook. I wish I could give you a clear-cut strategy of, how do you have Westbrook as your point guard and then win a championship? I don't know, dude. It's just tough for me to figure out.
It's
kind of sad to see Westbrook leaving, but
to me, the sad part about it is, though, and I'll turn this over to Lala after this, is you look at someone like Westbrook and you look at his game style and you're like, okay, I don't know how to complement that on the court. You look at someone like Harden and it's not just on the court. You can't say anything to this guy when you go back in the locker room. Yeah, at one point, he yelled at Austin Rivers for standing up in the middle of his free throw routine because he said he distracted him and made him miss the shot. Listen, buddy, accountability, man. You just need to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, maybe I missed the free throw. Maybe it was me. I don't know. I have a problem with a guy, because let's be honest, Harden's more talented than Westbrook, right? So you're looking at it from how do I build a championship squad around Westbrook? I'm sitting there why can't I build a championship squad around Harden? It's a little bit of a different question, and that's why I think it's more frustrating because it keeps you up at night a little bit longer, at least in my view. But enough from me. Lala, what's your take on this whole situation?
I just completely agree with what you said. 3-star players have documented negative playing experiences with James Harden. They all left. Chris Paul, Dwight Howard, Russell Westbrook. Now, with Russell Westbrook, it's different because we know, especially being Toronto Raptors fans, Kawhi Leonard has made it clear he wants to play with Paul George and Russell Westbrook. So I wasn't surprised when I heard Russell Westbrook to Clippers. Now I'm hearing Russell Westbrook. Charlotte has an interest in him. Of course, Michael Jordan's going to put his foot on the gas and say, let me get my Jordan player over here. But I think there's a conversation about James Harden that needs to be had, Michael, that you brought up. And, Kobe Bryant, before he passed away, he did an interview with Rachel Nichols and I think it was T-Mac. And he said that is not a championship-level player. You cannot win. He's a great offensive player, but what beyond that? Is he a team player?
Yep.
No. He'll take accountability when he's finally playing defense in the last possession of a playoff game, but never anytime else. He's exciting to watch, but I wouldn't want him on my team. And if he ever came to the Raptors, I would be really scared.
So yeah, Gary, I'll turn it over to you and ask you the same question. What's your whole take? I think, like, honestly, James Harden might be miscast as, like, that is, it's unfair to be like, okay, well, you have to be a team leader if you're the best player, right? He's an assassin, but you can be miscast in the sense of, okay, well, you don't have to be a leader, but you shouldn't be disrupting the locker room. PJ Tucker's getting pissed off about, it goes deeper than just Harden, right? It's unfair to put it all on Harden's front step. PJ Tucker's upset about not being offered the extension. Austin Rivers wasn't being given a role. He was asked to go and sub into the game, then asked to actually sit down before he subbed in so they could just put DeMarre Carroll in instead in his place. These are the types of things that happen in a dysfunctional workplace, right? So you can't put it all at the feet of James Harden, but for the most part, winning cures things. And if you can't win with a guy playing a certain style, where do you draw the line? But I'll turn it over to you and ask the same question. What's your take on this whole situation, Gary?
Well, my take pretty much is when you look at the play style of James Harden and when you look at the Rockets organization, you got to think, you can't really blame either or, right? Rockets organization, they probably collaborated with James and thinking, the no center position, like team basketball was going to work. And we realized, they went all the way to Game 7 against the Thunder. They only won one game against the Lakers. It didn't work. It literally didn't work. So now they're backtracking. They're like, oh, we have to get a new GM, a new coach, and completely reconstruct this roster to be like a centered foot, like at least having one center that can actually play. Now, right. On the James Harden side, I feel like James Harden is the type of player where he needs like very good, like Robert Covington, like just great role players around him. I feel like when you get a ball dominant superstar like Westbrook, even like a Kevin Durant or even like a LeBron James, I think Harden struggles with that because he knows that he can make magic with the ball. He can make string music with it. But then putting that trust into someone else is something that he struggles with. He would rather make the play himself than having Westbrook making an amazing play for them. You know what I'm saying? So I think for me, it's both sides issue. I think when you're the Rockets organization, you have to sit down and think like, all right, are we going to spend our money for another superstar or trade for another superstar? Are we going to get a lot of really good role players? Like maybe, like I know he's like on contract, but for example, like a Brook Lopez or something like that, like those type of caliber players. Mm-hmm. Are we going to do that? Or are we just going to trade Harden at this point and just be like, we just got to get really good assets for him and like go in a different direction, go and find a different superstar, redraft, find the next best player. Like the Rockets are in a scramble right now. And
right.
I'm with Vice. I feel bad for the organization right now.
Yeah, so Vice, I'll actually turn over one more question to you, actually. If you're the Rockets, where do you go from here, jumping off of Gary's point? Because at the end of the day, you're giving $40 million to Westbrook, $40 million to Harden, $20 million to Eric Gordon. That's $100 million in a $109 million salary cap world. That is probably – you're not building a championship squad doing that, but where do you go? Do you go full rebuild, or do you somehow try to salvage this?
I think, honestly, they should 100% try and salvage it because they already traded the house for Westbrook to get him. And now if they're to trade away, they would get assets back, but they would essentially just be getting the assets back that they gave away in the first place. And they'd be at like a net zero, but they would lose Harden. I do think it's hard for the Houston Rockets to get a better player than James Harden. I think they've come this far. Maybe the whole 3-point shooting revolution might change with someone other than Daryl Morey at the helm. Maybe they can try a different kind of play style without Mike D'Antoni as coach. But I do think I've always, I'm like everybody else. James Harden game sometimes frustrates me, but he is possibly the best pick and roll player in the NBA. One of the all-time great scorers now at this point.
Yep.
So to give that up, even if you get 5 first-round draft picks from somebody, it could be worth it for the rebuild. But the fact that they already are so short on assets for the future, they would essentially have to rebuild with everything they get from Harden. So I think either trade Westbrook and get what you can, and maybe try a different coach, different GM, and run it with Harden. And if that doesn't work, then maybe you ship them out. It is kind of a tough situation because the full rebuild, I just don't think they have the assets for it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, when you go and look at someone like Harden, and you look at how much money he's making and everything, He's already disgruntled with this front office with not considering him when it comes to the coaching changes that were made, when it comes to the owner just making decisions with the GM even. And obviously Daryl Morey stepped down. Wasn't like fired, but he decided to resign and everything. When you go and look at it from that perspective, how much bad blood's already sown and that can't go back on, right? How easy is it going to be to run it back with Harden and have a sixth seed, seventh seed team and really know that you're spinning your tires in the mud, but you still have that star player who's going to bring people in and you're not going for a full rebuild. Yes, they gave up a lot to get Westbrook, and I understand that. But at the same time, like what you could get for someone like a Harden could put you in a good position in 5 years, whereas you could just have Harden on a max contract where you're not really competing and you're sitting there in the same situation as the Thunder were when they had Westbrook on their team. What are your thoughts on that, though, Lala?
I think Rockets blow the whole thing up. Trade every single player. Get some young, solid players. Some young, solid players. A lot of draft picks. It's a hot mess right now.
Yeah.
Everyone's upset. Rivers is upset. PJ Tucker's upset. A lot of guys weren't getting in the rotation. It was a mess to watch. Clearly, there's something going on there. You're already starting fresh. You got a new head coach. Daryl Morey left. Let's just, get everyone out. Everyone needs some new air to breathe. Let's start something new in Houston. They can do it. So why not?
Gary, reset, run it back. Where are you at?
Man, I'm totally 100% on that. I mean, like, there's an example I would like to give is the Boston Celtics. Now, I don't know if they can do the same thing. I don't know if they can do the same thing as the Celtics, but look, they had Paul Pierce, KG, Rondo. They had all those guys, Ray Allen. They had all those guys. Perfect. Like, they were old, but they weren't, they were like still good to play. Like, I remember, what's it called? I think the final season they played against the Miami Heat, they like took them to like 6 games or whatever. Like, they were still a really good team. Now, having said that, I don't know if Houston can do the same thing that Boston has done. But however, they have a caliber player like James Harden where they can get the picks, they can get the players, they can get to just start fresh. I'm agreeing with Vice saying you probably won't get another James Harden, but you might get a better Houston team. You will never get another James Harden, but you'll get a team that actually plays together, actually works together, and actually we can go back to that team where old-time Akeem Olajuwon, where they actually played as a team and they had one superstar, And you also got to keep in mind, James Harden is 31 years old, right?
Yep.
How many years does he have? How many years does he have left? And on top of that, how many years has this system worked and not worked, right? The only time it's worked is when they took the Warriors to Game 7 and when the whole Chris Paul injury, right? After that, they've been on a downhill slope, losing to Portland in the first round last year. And then, that wasn't Houston. Sorry, that was the Thunder. I was getting my teams mixed up. But still, they don't have the greatest resume at all right now.
Yep.
And I feel like if you're Houston, I agree with Vice saying you maybe do it for one more year, but then, like after that, maybe you just think about it and say maybe this is not going to work. New coach and everything, and just blow the whole thing up.
Well, I take the Bill Belichick approach to it, where it's like I'd rather trade him a year too early than a year too late, right? Mm-hmm. Like the last thing you want to do is see James Harden, God forbid, knock on wood, he gets an injury. Now what, right? Like you just get rid of it while you can, while people look at it like, oh my God, we're going to win the championship if we bring him in. And then that becomes their problem. And then all you need, I'd say this for fantasy, I do this for real life. All you need is one person to overvalue somebody and give you everything you need to walk away laughing. And you will, like you said, and like Vice said, you're not going to get a James Harden back. You will not. You cannot. It's not happening. You don't see superstars go for another superstar apple to apple. But you can get what you need to build a better team for the future, like you said, Gary. And that's pretty much where I'm at with it. But hey, let us know what you think in the comment section below. What should they do with Harden? What do you think about Oladipo making these movements? Do they go and try to get an Oladipo on the Rockets? Who knows? Who really cares? Like, just throw your thoughts out there in the comment section. Like and subscribe if you're new, and we'll catch you on the next video. Thanks for tuning in to Above the Break.